Hi, Sherilyn Crowther, President of the Seattle Special Education PTSA, and appreciate having the opportunity to come and present this. Um, and do you want to record this as its own separate thing, or you put it up with the other? Put it up with Caleb's? Sam?
And also,
That is a good question.
Sam, also I could
I-
record ours and then upload it to our if you allow me to record.
So I think if we just leave it running, we can edit it into two sections.
Got it.
So
Okay, great.
let's just.
Okay, well then, again, thank you. I'm excited to be able to share our our guide to special education in Seattle Public Schools. And while our homepage here at Seattle Special Education PTSA.org does declare just released, I think it's because we're just still so excited about it and feel like it's brand new. We were able to bring this guide. This is about it's a 24-page guide that's all written by, it's written by volunteers, PTSA members, past and present, or members and board members, who really took on this approach with an idea of, man, I wish I'd known then what I know now, and wanted to see how much we could do to help parents get the knowledge early. Or get the knowledge, because sometimes knowledge is missing. And as we see here, we also made sure that we did it in 10 different languages. And these 10 languages are the languages that we did a request for information. These are the 10 languages most commonly spoken in the homes of students with disabilities, I believe, or students with IEPs might be this specific. So we have Spanish, Somali, Amharic, Tagalog, sorry. It's Girl Scout cookie time, sorry. Oromore, Simplified Chinese, Arabic, Tigrinya, Vietnamese, and of course, English. And these have been, I'll just talk a little bit too in terms of the translation. It's a double translation, so we hope that we've got a very high level of language accuracy for what are some pretty in-depth topics. And Janice, if you've got one open, you want to take a look? So these are available all as PDFs. We do have, maybe we have a few printouts left. We did do printing.
Let me just jump in. We did a second printing. So we're actually, we have hard copies available in the languages that principals have requested the most.
Yes, and the reason that principals have requested them is because we have been doing PTA presentations. And so since the guide came out last fall, we have been working with the various PTAs around the city, finding an opportunity to come in and sometimes just do a brief presentation to tell people about our organization and that we are something that's a resource for guaranteed for families in their schools. And also in some cases, they've also even asked for us to come back and we do a larger presentation that really kind of looks at special education as a whole. As you see here on the page 1, really getting an opportunity for who we are, a lot about us, and what opportunities exist, how we operate. And then it is both chock full of information and it does not have as much information as we want. At some point, as this small volunteer project just built and built and built, we had to say, we're done. We're going to put it to print, and then we'll be doing updates next year, ideally, or next school year. Janice, did you want to add anything on this page?
I just wanted to add that sort of the goal and the reason that we started this project was because over the years that the Special Ed PTSA has existed in Seattle, which is since 2006, we've heard from families all throughout the district about the challenges they have in navigating the special education system, which can be very confusing and overwhelming for families. And so what we set out to do was to write this guide from the perspective of caregivers. The main audience is other caregivers. Before we finalized, we got input from community organizations to make sure that we were also reflecting cultural differences to meet the needs of the diverse community that is Seattle Public Schools. And we spent over a year writing the guide. So it's not something that we, threw together quickly.
Yes, it started small and became a project that is highly vetted. And the design is actually also volunteer work. So putting this together. Top 10 tips, the idea that really in some ways you can use this guide as almost taking pages out as you need them. And that's certainly parent to parent. It could be that it's somebody else in the school, a teacher or educator or staff member who is sharing this information, maybe a social worker, whether they're printing out the entire packet or they have one, or that they're sharing a page or two. So on this top 10, it's basically making it as straightforward as possible in terms of if this is all you do, then you're in some ways ahead of the game, or at least you have a better understanding of the structure that you've walked into as you're dealing with the special education system. This is we'll go through, we have done different things with different pages. And so some pages are really informational and some are tools. And this would be a tool page. If anybody here has worked with some kid, either IEP or possibly 504, this is really what's required to keep track of all the names. We've provided the titles essentially so that it's easier for you to start to fill in. I'm in not year 12, and beyond that, but as soon as I saw this, I was like, why hasn't this been available? Because if they had this at the front page of an IEP, it would make it so much easier. And it's not just about the people who are on the IEP team. This is also really about the behind the scenes, not like, oh, there's somebody who supports a special education teacher, the program specialist, and that program specialist then answers to a regional supervisor, and that regional supervisor goes on up. That's where you start to get into the special education director and moving up. So if there are issues that where more support is called for, then you have ideas about where to find, how to contact the people, because you have names of who's responsible. It's also things like your related services or your therapy. So who is your PT right now? Who is your OT or your speech language therapist? Janice, other notes? Janice has done the majority of the PTA presentations to date, so I definitely rely on her in terms of what kind of feedback she's gotten from the audiences.
We've just gotten a lot of great feedback from families that find this really useful, and teachers. It's helpful for everybody on an IEP team.
Similar, we have a lot of FAQs and information pages, but there are areas we wanted to make sure we call them out. So language access, and kind of also that part of some of the cultural responsiveness. This is where we worked with several different organizations. And as we see in the legislative, what do we do about poorly translated IEP materials? The concept, again, this is available in those 10 languages total, helping people understand what their rights are, especially when they're dealing with multiple challenges that they're crossing into multiple systems, whether it's disability systems or racist systems, xenophobic systems. Okay, now I'll turn to the positive. again, advocacy tips in terms of saying not advocacy does not come to everyone naturally. And depending on your cultural upbringing, you may have a different take on what is advocacy and what is okay. We wanted to help people understand what rights they have. We have a couple of, this is the one clear roadmap on how you kind of work through the system. I've got a cat that wants my attention. We have other guides throughout this, or other pages throughout this guide that show you how programs work. You know, if you've got a particular problem, this is what it can escalate to if you're trying to get a solution. But in this case, this is really not certainly 1, 2, 3, 4 ideally are not that difficult in terms of putting stuff together. It depends on if you've gotten evaluations or as you move towards those. But the idea that it's like, okay, there are steps. Everybody else, ideally, everybody else that you're working with within the school system understands these steps. I have had, Janice was talking about teachers, I have had a principal say, oh, can I keep this? Because this is a good reminder. And we're happy to see what we can do to help further education about student support for students with disabilities.
And I'll just say that the guide is written not just for students who already have an IEP, but it's also written for families who have a student who might be struggling and they don't really know why, and they're wondering if their student might benefit from receiving special education services. And so this page in particular is a roadmap of all the steps that you might have to go through, from recognizing that there might be an issue to potentially getting an IEP or a 504 plan.
And that's a good point too, when we think about PTAs working with this and bringing this to their members, because there are a lot of hidden or invisible or unrecognized disabilities. And many of those might not present as the specific problem until the child is in several years into school. And then it can be where a parent or a family member understands something's not right. And it can be, and I've heard this story several times, incredibly frustrating, heartbreaking, all sorts of different things, to try and convince the system that no, there's something that's not right and I need your help, which actually is where this page leads to. If you have got, as a parent or family member, have gotten to a part where it's like, this student needs support, and you say, I need an evaluation, this goes through some of the timelines that you have. This is a timeline whether you get an evaluation and whether you get an IEP, re-evaluations in terms of that. And then also, as you're moving through this process, complaints, and unfortunately, due process, the way that the system works across the board, not just in Seattle Public Schools, is there are times where parents will go to due process because that is the only way they can get some needs met. Ideally, the more information we all have and bring it to people early, then they're able to get solutions. Special education, not referred to as SPED, although that would be a alphabet soup right there. Special education, like any good bureaucracy, is an alphabet soup. And so again, you know, one page to help everybody understand that their LRE and their FAPE is all because, you know, they failed, however it worked with getting your PWN. And it can be very confusing, especially when you're around a team that is very comfortable using all these acronyms and you're trying to keep up. So, you know, the fact that we have definitions in part, also we want to share to people that you're not expected to know all this. This is why we have definitions, and keep these things handy. This is another wonderful tools page. Well, actually, it's a two-part tools page. It's a how to use it on this, a student introduction, kind of a little mini resume. and not trying to get a job, but rather to make sure that the connection with your staff, with the teacher or an aide or anybody that's going to be working with your child, really gets to see a lot more of the person. Too often with disabilities, the focus is on the deficit. And I think this is, and you'll see if you want to go to the next page there, Janice, this is really an opportunity for a parent to say, here is who this whole kid is. This can be printed out, this can be filled out online, can be printed, of course. You could add a photo to it, and some really clear ideas about, or some prompts. Obviously, once you've written this, somebody could write even more to also share with the teacher or a staffer. And Janice, do you remember, I mean, how do we come up about this? Somebody was doing this already, or another parent?
There are many of these, there are templates for these kinds of introductions available online, and many of our members have used them over the years. And teachers who come to our meetings have said how useful they find it, especially at the beginning of the year, because an IEP document can be very long and dense. And this gives the teacher, particularly at the beginning of the year when they're getting to know all the students in their class, it gives them a little snapshot. And the beauty of it too is, as Cheryl Lynn said, when you're, as the caregiver, when you're writing it up to give it to your child's team, you can really emphasize in there what your child's strengths are and what's worked in the past, and to help them be successful in school.
And okay, so another roadmap, except that we don't really want to have to go on this journey. This is where avoid the destination if you can. This is another way in terms of if you are in a process where there are problems, whether it's both an IEP or 504. I guess we've really kind of addressed already the, even trying to fight for an evaluation and find out. There are different aspects to go through, and this explains them a little bit more. This is not a legal document, and I think Janice said this, we did have a special education attorney review this to make sure that we were not inaccurate. But this is information that helps you understand, okay, that's what the process is. And then we have FAQ Bonanza. I think we have 5, maybe 6 pages of this. IEP and 504, some of that. Understanding the service pathways. Well, Samantha spoke earlier about concerns about students harmed at Roosevelt, the students who are receiving their special education supports in the distinct service pathway, which is often referred to as the distinct room or the distinct students. So understanding what distinct and focus and the various pathways, and actually this is already out of date because by next year, by the next school year, the district and the special education department will have rolled resource, access, and social emotional learning all into one service pathway as part of their move towards more inclusive education. Janice, why don't you speak to this one a little bit?
Sure. So there are 2 pages on school discipline. And the reason that we included these 2 pages is because not just in Seattle, but this is true nationally, students with disabilities are disproportionately represented in students who are subjected to school discipline. And so the first page really just is an overview of school discipline in Seattle Public Schools. And the second page sort of starts on the bottom of the first page and moving into the second page gets more specific into the fact that because if your child has an IEP or a 504 plan, but particularly if your child has an IEP, there are some protections in both federal and state law because the overarching principle is that students should not be disciplined for behavior that is the result of their disability. And so it can be kind of complicated to understand how that is implemented. And that's why we did kind of a visual trying to explain what some of the processes are if your student is subjected to discipline, and what your students' rights and your family's rights are in terms of addressing those issues. So that's why we included those 2 pages.
It is an issue that comes up all too often. I mean, frankly, if it comes up once a year, I would say it's too often. And it happens more than that. Again, all of the resources or various resources that we've got, just a lot of different aspects, you know, kind of one handy space to find these things. So resources that are available around a wide range. Resources that we created as a PTSA. These are big hits with teachers in terms of, you click on through to our website, and actually, well, if somebody could grab one, that'd be great. They're fun to play with. They're virtual reading rooms. It's a very kind of strong visual that shows all sorts of different ideas about books and movies or videos and individuals, and who are all related in terms of disability rights, disability justice. Judy Heumann, who, if you haven't read her book, highly recommend her book, highly recommend it. And we've got 2 different rooms. So one is for more elementary school, maybe early middle, and then the other is really for teenagers and adults as well. And then a lot of the different sources that we used. So again, you know, sharing resources and citing sources. And then, of course, we always encourage everyone to go ahead and join our PTSA. As the district-wide PTSA, we don't have a school home, and yet we know there are students in every school that have special education services provided or that need to. So that is our that is this year's, or the 22-23 school year version of our guide to getting results. Any questions or thoughts? I see this.
Thank you, Charlene and Jen.
If I could
And
add just one more point, Sam, I know that we're running
I
short on
want to
time.
both do some questions. Yep.
I know we're running short on time, so I just want to throw out one last thing to make sure we get to it. This was a big reach for our special education PTSA, and we spent about twice our annual budget on the cost of translating and printing the guide in the 10 languages that you saw. And we have been, as Sherilyn mentioned at the beginning, I've been coordinating as the FACE chair this year of the PTSA. I've been coordinating our presentations throughout the district, and we've presented at about half the schools at this point, or we have presentations scheduled through PTAs, and many of them have generously made a donation towards what it cost us to produce this guide. And of course, we want to, as Sherilyn said, we hope to update it again, because there are changes every year, and that's going to mean an annual cost. And so, you know, we would appreciate and hope that Seattle Council would also consider financial support for the work that went into the guide, as many school PTAs around the district have already done. And we would be deeply grateful.